Hey guys, how's it going? We're gonna pick up this week looking at the 1950s. This is our ongoing decades class video series. This week we're gonna look at the top songs of the 1950s, the top albums, the top TV shows, top movies, and the top book. So we got a lot to cover. It'll be a lot of fun. I really like 1950s entertainment. It was a lot of fun. All right, so these songs, just like the previous week when I did a top songs list, these are going to be in alphabetical order. The first song on the list is All I Have to Do Is Dream by the Everly Brothers. The Everly Brothers were one of the most popular duos of the decade. It was a group of brothers, or a combination, Phil Everly and Don Everly. I actually had a chance to see them in concert when I was in college. I went to a concert in Atlanta where they came out and performed, and it was really great to see them. I knew then that they were getting pretty old and they wouldn't be touring or performing very much longer. So it was really fun to see them, and they actually came out and performed this song. It was really cool to see them. It's a beautiful song. It's probably their best song, as if you look at their entire music collection, it's their best song. Number 2 on the list, Here Comes Santa Claus. This is by Elvis Presley. The original version had been released by Gene Autry back in 1949, but Elvis's version was a little bit more of a rock version. It's one of Elvis's best Christmas songs, I think. The next song on the list, also by Elvis, I Want You, I Need You, I Love You by Elvis Presley. This was 1956, one of his early songs. It's not one of his best known songs today, but it's one of his best. There is a clip on YouTube of him performing this song live on, it wasn't the Ed Sullivan Show, it was another variety show. But if anybody wants to see that clip, I can send you that. The next song on the list is Johnny B. Good by Chuck Berry. Johnny B. Good was ranked by Rolling Stone magazine as the #1 guitar song of all time, which I think it probably deserves to be ranked as that. It shows Chuck Berry's skill as a guitarist, probably better than any other one song he ever did. Next on the list is Listen to Me by Buddy Holly. This is not one of Buddy Holly's best known songs, but it's one of his best songs. He used the technique it's called overdubbing to record this song. He recorded his voice and then recorded a second track of himself singing, so it sounds like he's harmonizing with himself. It sounds like two people singing, all it was just one. He was the first rock and roll singer to ever do that. Buddy Holly liked to experiment a lot in the studio and do things that no other rock singer was doing, and he produced a lot of good music that way. All right, the next song on the list is Lonesome Town by Ricky Nelson. Ricky Nelson got his start in the 1950s as one of the cast members of his parents' TV show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, where he played Ricky, their son, on the show. He had a lot of big hits in the 50s, but Lonesome Town, I think, is his best song from the 50s overall. Next on the list is Magic Moments by Perry Como. Perry Como was a pop singer, easy listening singer. He wasn't a rock singer. If you remember the old 1980s TV show Who's the Boss, Tony Maselli on the show, played by Tony Danza, was always talking about Perry Como. He was Italian, and so he loved Perry Como because Perry Como was Italian. It's a great song. Let's see. Next on the list is Only 16 by Sam Cooke. This was Sam Cooke's best song of the decade. Sam Cooke was a Mississippi native. He was from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and he had a great voice. He started out as a gospel singer, and then he moved into singing R&B pop music because it was difficult to make a living singing only gospel music. He had a lot of big hits. He also sang Another Saturday Night, Twisting the Night Away, That's the Sound of the Men Working on the Train, You Send Me. Had a lot, Bring It On Home to Me, a lot of great songs, but Only 16 I think is his best. Next on the list is Roll Over Beethoven. This is another Chuck Berry song. This song was covered in the 1960s by the Beatles. It once again showcased Chuck Berry as one of the preeminent rock artists of the decade. John Lennon once said that if you had to give rock and roll another name, you'd have to call it Chuck Berry, which shows you just how highly the Beatles regarded Chuck Berry. Next on the list, number 10, The Folks Who Live on the Hill by Peggy Lee. Peggy Lee was a popular jazz singer in this decade. You may know her from the movie Lady and the Tramp. She was the voice of Peg, the dog, in the dog pound scene. She sang the movie's song "He's a Tramp." She also wrote the film's songs. She also performed the voices of the Siamese Cats. Anyway, this song, "The Folks Who Live on the Hill," is a really pretty song. If you haven't heard it, I recommend it. Number 11, "True Love Ways" by Buddy Holly. This was a song that Buddy Holly wrote for his wife shortly after they got married. He recorded this song in October of 1958. He and his wife got married in August of 58. He recorded the song in New York, and he used a full orchestra to help him record the song. This was the first time that a rock artist had ever used an orchestra. And it's a beautiful song. It's by far the best song of his career. It's by far the best song of the 1950s, in my opinion. Although the song actually wasn't released until after he died. Buddy Holly died less than 6 months after getting married in a tragic plane crash, which kind of makes the song that much more special or poignant when you think about the historical circumstances of the song. Buddy Holly remained very famous in the years after his death because he recorded so much music that hadn't been released at that time. For about 10 years later, new songs of his were continually released. I mentioned a while ago that the Beatles were highly inspired by Chuck Berry. They were also highly inspired by Buddy Holly. They named their band the Beatles in honor of Buddy Holly's band, the Crickets. And then the last song on the list, number 12, "Wishing," which is also a Buddy Holly song. This was a song that was actually offered to the Everly Brothers, but they turned it down, and that's why Buddy Holly ended up with the song. It kind of has the sound of an Everly Brothers song. It sounds very similar to their style. All right, we're going to look now at the top 10 albums of the 1950s, and these are in no particular order. Some of these albums were released after the 1950s, but they showcase music of the 1950s, and so they still make the list for the purposes that I'm trying to make a list. All right, number one, Ella and Louie, 1956. This is an album of duets between Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong, two of the best jazz singers of that era. Number two, Elvis's Christmas album, 1957. This was the album that featured "Here Comes Santa Claus," like I mentioned a while ago. It also featured "Santa Claus is Back in Town," "Blue Christmas." This was his classic holiday album. With 15 million copies sold, it's the best-selling Christmas album of all time. Number three, My Fair Lady soundtrack, 1958. My Fair Lady became a Hollywood film in 1964, and that soundtrack also did well, but this soundtrack, although it features the same music, it doesn't have entirely the same cast. In the 1964 version, Audrey Hepburn played Liza Doolittle, and Marni Nixon provided the singing voice of Liza. In the 1958 version, Broadway version, which is what this is referring to, Julie Andrews was the singing voice of and the actress who played Liza Doolittle. And of course, she went on to become famous as Mary Poppins, and she also played in Sound of Music. Number four, Buddy Holly, 20 Golden Greats. This was an album that came out in 1978, but it's a greatest hits compilation of Buddy Holly's music, and it's a great compilation. It covers the whole span of his short career, and it's a great album if you're trying to get acquainted with Buddy Holly's music. Number five, The Best of Ritchie Valens. This was another compilation album. It came out in 1981, but it again features the best music that Ritchie Valens recorded. Ritchie Valens was only 17 when he also was on that tragic plane crash that killed Buddy Holly. He's best known for songs such as La Bamba, Come On Let's Go, Oh Donna. La Bamba is his best known song. Number six, A Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. This came out in 1957. The 1950s were a great era for holiday music. Every year during the Christmas season, some of the best music on the radio is this 1950s classic Christmas music. Number 7, Bing Crosby, A Christmas Sing with Bing Around the World, 1956. This is some of Bing Crosby's best holiday music. Number 8, Elvis's Golden Records, 1958. This was only about 2 years into Elvis's career, but he'd already recorded a lot of hits at this point, so this was his first, or one of his first greatest hits compilations, 1958. Number 9, Chuck Berry, The Great 28, 1982. This was a compilation of Chuck Berry's best hits from his early career. And number 10, Ella and Louie Again, 1957. This was the follow-up to the 1956 album of duets. All right, so some of the top artists and bands of the decade, just to kind of recap 1950s music. Buddy Holly was definitely one of the top artists. Elvis Presley, Ella Fitzgerald, Chuck Berry, the Shirelles, Sam Cooke, and Nat King Cole. I'm going to show you a picture now. This is a picture, this is Sam Cooke right here, who sang Only 16. There's Ella Fitzgerald, who had those 2 albums of duets with Louis Armstrong. And here's the Shirelles, who really became more famous in the 1960s, but they got their start in the 1950s. Alrighty. Let's see. Okay, moving right along, we're looking now at the top movies of the 1950s. The top, and we're doing these in chronological order. Number 1, Scrooge, 1951. The most critically acclaimed film version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Scrooge stars Alastair Sim. Perhaps better than any other actor who portrayed Scrooge, Sim is able to brilliantly capture both the miserly Scrooge as well as the jubilant Christmas-loving Scrooge. And this is a picture of the film poster. There we go. The number 2 film on the list, Martin Luther, 1953. This film tells the gripping story of the 16th century reformer Martin Luther and his quest to bring the Catholic Church back to the doctrines of the apostles contained in the scripture. This is a film that is important not just for Lutherans or for Christians, but for anyone who wants to have a solid grasp of history. In 1999, Biography featured a countdown of the 100 most important figures of the past millennium, and Luther was ranked at number 2. So to have a good understanding of just recent world history, Luther's a person you need to know about. Here's a picture of the poster. It's a great movie. Number 3, Peter Pan, 1953. Disney's adaptation of J.M. Barrie's classic story features the voices of Catherine Beaumont as Wendy Darling and Bobby Driscoll as Peter Pan. If you ever go back and watch the original cartoon version of Alice in Wonderland, you may notice that the voice of Alice sounds a lot like the voice of Wendy. That's because Catherine Beaumont was the voice of both. If you ever go back and watch the live-action film of 1950, Treasure Island, Robert Louis Stevenson's book, which Disney made into a film, Jim Hawkins, who is the main character in the movie, the boy in the movie, is portrayed by Bobby Driscoll, who went on to be the voice of Peter Pan. The film features a memorable soundtrack, including songs such as The Second Star to the Right and You Can Fly. Peter Pan is also the final Disney film in which all 9 members of Disney's 9 Old Men worked together as directing animators. That phrase, the 9 Old Men, referred to a core group of 9 animators who had started working with Disney during the Snow White era and continued to work with Disney up until 1953. Of the 9 Old Men, I think the last of the 9 Old Men retired in 1981. He was involved in The Fox and the Hound. So anyway, the last film that had all 9 was Peter Pan. Number 4, Roman Holiday, 1953. Oh, I don't think I showed you the poster of Peter Pan. Let me do that real quick. This is Peter Pan. I actually saw Peter Pan for the first time. I went to Disney World when I was 8. My parents took my brother and me there. And while staying at Disney World, there was a movie theater like on the property. And I saw Peter Pan. And it was just so cool to see Peter Pan, the movie, while at Disney World. It was just a really cool experience. Alright, Roman Holiday is number 4 on the list. This was also 1953. This was Audrey Hepburn's debut film, and for her performance she won her first and only Oscar award. The movie was originally planned to be filmed in color, but shooting on location in Rome was was so expensive, the directors chose to keep it black and white to save money. The film is ranked number 4 on the American Film Institute's list of top 10 best romantic comedies. Here's a picture of Roman Holiday. It's a great movie. Highly recommend it. Number 5, Dial M for Murder, 1954. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, Dial M for Murder stars Ray Milland and Grace Kelly in one of her most memorable roles. Kelly would star in 2 other Alfred Hitchcock films, To Catch a Thief with Cary Grant and Rear Window with James Stewart, and epitomized the glamorous Hitchcock blonde. He loved to have blonde actresses star in his films. On the American Film Institute's list of top 10 mystery films, Dial M for Murder is ranked number 9. Here's a picture of a movie poster for Dial M for Murder. It's a great story. I forget where I was flying. One of the first times I ever flew in an airplane. Sometimes you have the option of watching films on the plane. That's where I first saw this movie. Very interesting movie. All right, number 6 on the list, Sabrina. Sabrina is a romantic comedy featuring Humphrey Bogart, departing from his usual tough guy persona, playing instead a business tycoon who can't help from falling in love with the daughter of his chauffeur, Sabrina, portrayed by Audrey Hepburn. For her work on the film, Hepburn was nominated for an Academy Award. The film's other star, William Holden, was a lifelong friend of Ronald Reagan, and when Ronald and Nancy Reagan wed in 1952, Holden was the best man. Here's a picture of the movie poster for Sabrina. It's Audrey Hepburn in the middle, Bill Holden on the left, and Humphrey Bogart on the right. It's a great movie. Again, highly recommend it. Number 7, Rear Window. I mentioned that film a while ago. It's another film that Grace Kelly starred in. Rear Window tells the fascinating story of journalist L.B. Jeffries, portrayed by James Stewart, recovering from a leg injury, who, as he recovers, becomes obsessed with observing his neighbors across the courtyard of his apartment. Jeffries becomes convinced that one of his neighbors has murdered his wife. Jeffries enlists his girlfriend, Grace Kelly, to help prove it. The film is based on a 1942 short story by Cornell Woolrich titled It Had to Be Murder. And here is a movie poster. So in the 1990s, Christopher Reeve actually starred in a remake of this film. Christopher Reeve, this was after his accident that had caused him to become disabled. He played the man in the wheelchair that Jimmy Stewart had originally played in the 1950s. Number 8 on the film list, The Lady and the Tramp. The Lady and the Tramp is one of Disney's most charming films, featuring memorable music written by jazz pop singer Peggy Lee. I mentioned her a minute ago. Songs include Bella Notte and He's a Tramp. At its 1955 release, it became Disney's most financially successful film since Snow White. The American Film Institute's list of 100 greatest romance movies, Lady and the Tramp is ranked number 95. A live-action remake of Lady and the Tramp was released by Disney in 2019. Here's a picture of the original theatrical poster of Lady and the Tramp. It's a fun movie. Number 9, The Ten Commandments, 1956. Charlton Heston portrays Moses in this impressive retelling of the biblical story of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. In several contemporary sources, it was noted that Heston was cast partially due to his resemblance to Michelangelo's renowned statue of Moses. That's kind of a funny coincidence. Pharaoh is portrayed by Yul Brynner, who is remembered for his role as the king of Siam in the 1950s musical The King and I. The American Film Institute ranks The Ten Commandments the number 10 best epic film of all time. The film was narrated by director Cecil B. DeMille. Here's a picture of the poster. It's Charlton Heston with the beard as Moses, and on the other side is Yul Brynner as Pharaoh. Probably the most impressive visual scene of this film is the crossing of the Red Sea. It's pretty amazing how they managed to pull it off in 1956 with so much less computer technology that we have today. Number 10 on the list, Vertigo, 1958. Vertigo is the most critically acclaimed of all Alfred Hitchcock's films, with the British Film Institute ranking it the number 1 film of all time. Starring James Stewart and Kim Novak, Vertigo is a chilling story of murder and lost love. Stewart, who was 25 years older than Novak, felt uncomfortable playing a romantic lead with a woman half his age, and in following years, Stewart refrained from romantic lead roles. Number 11 on the list, North by Northwest, 1959. North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint, is a classic tale of espionage and mistaken identity. One of the most memorable scenes of the film is a chase across the presidential faces of Mount Rushmore. The score was composed by Bernard Herrmann, who would go on to collaborate with Hitchcock numerous times. North by Northwest was ranked number 40 on the American Film Institute's list of top 100 movies and was ranked number 7 in AFI's list of best mystery movies. Here's a picture of North by Northwest. There's Cary Grant running from the plane that's chasing him. Number 12, Ben-Hur. This was 1959. Based on Lew Wallace's novel, Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston, tells the compelling story of the oppression of Judah Ben-Hur, a Jewish man living in first century Israel, and his struggle to forgive his Roman oppressors. His life is changed by an encounter with Jesus of Nazareth. The famous chariot race scene took 5 weeks to film and cost $1 million. The film won an unprecedented 11 Academy Awards. As of 2020, only Titanic, 1997, and Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, 2003, have matched the film's wins. On the American Film Institute's list of top 100 movies, Ben-Hur is ranked number 72. And here's a picture of the film poster. It's a great movie. Alright, I'm going to mention now the top TV shows in the 1950s. This is really the first decade that we can discuss TV much. 30s and 40s, TV just wasn't a big thing yet. The top shows in the 1950s were Alfred Hitchcock Presents, I Love Lucy, and Looney Tunes. I'm going to show you posters. This is Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This is a weekly half-hour television show. Narrated, not really narrated, but he would introduce each episode and close each episode out. Then there's I Love Lucy, starring Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. And then there's a poster of Looney Tunes. The top book of the decade was Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. This is a picture of the book. This was Lewis's book where he attempts to explain and defend the beliefs that have been common to all Christians in all places at all times. That's why it's called Mere Christianity. It's a great book. Wonderful, wonderful book. All right, guys, that's a look at the 1950s. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week looking at the 1960s. God bless you guys.